The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks through the tall pine trees as Emma Whitmore parked her dusty blue sedan in the gravel lot of Crestmore Consulting's main office. The building loomed ahead, sleek glass panels and brushed steel beams that seemed to reflect the self-importance of those who worked inside. Most people who entered through its revolving doors wore tailored suits, digital watches, and the confidence of someone who belonged. Emma, by contrast, wore a simple navy blouse tucked into high-waisted slacks and a soft beige cardigan that had belonged to her mother. Her heels were modest, well-worn, and slightly scuffed from the cracked sidewalks of the neighborhood she still called home. She sat still for a moment in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel. In the back seat lay a neatly packed tote with handwritten reports, her calculator, and an analog planner with pages dog-eared from use. No tech, no flair. But she knew every number inside that bag like the lines on her palms. Emma had been invited to consult on a fiscal audit for the company's public-private partnership division, an area plagued with recent misallocations that management claimed were mere clerical errors. But Emma knew better. Patterns didn't lie. Numbers whispered truths that smug voices often buried under expensive smiles. As she stepped inside, a young receptionist with manicured nails and perfectly curled hair looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distracted. "Emma Whitmore," she replied gently, extending her ID. "I'm here to meet Mr. Langston's team." The receptionist glanced at the badge, her eyebrows lifting slightly as if surprised this soft-spoken woman wasn't here to deliver coffee. After a brief pause, she typed something quickly, then waved a hand toward the elevators. "6th floor. You'll need a visitor pass." Emma took it quietly and walked toward the elevator, aware of the curious glances from several staff members lounging near the espresso bar. They wore brand-name shoes and exchanged comments about weekend plans. She was not one of them, and they knew it. The elevator doors opened on a sleek hallway lined with minimalist artwork and backlit glass panels. As she stepped into the large meeting room, the laughter inside died down. 4 men in dark suits and a woman in a silk blouse turned to stare. At the head of the table was Jeremy Langston, executive partner, mid-40s, with a voice that could fill a conference room even when he whispered. He didn't rise to greet her. "You're Emma?" She nodded. "Yes, thank you for having me." Langston leaned back, folding his hands over his chest. "We expected someone different." One of the associates chuckled, a sharp sound quickly swallowed by awkward silence. Emma remained composed, placing her folder on the table and carefully removing a sheet of calculations. "You sent me the reports. I reviewed them. There are inconsistencies in lines 14, 27, and 38. Would you like me to walk you through the risk exposure step by step?" Langston raised an eyebrow. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he said with a smirk. "We'll start with introductions. You can observe for now." Emma took a seat without protest. Around her, pens clicked and laptops opened. But beneath, the surface of polished words and corporate ease, she felt it. Dismissal. They had already decided who she was, an outsider, an outdated relic, perhaps a charity hire. But Emma wasn't here to be liked. She wasn't here to fit in. She was here to do what she did best. Read between the numbers, listen to what balance sheets refused to confess, and eventually, let facts speak louder than mockery. She took a deep breath, not to calm herself, but to prepare. Because the real work hadn't begun. Not yet. By the 3rd hour, Emma Whitmore had heard enough. She sat at the edge of the long mahogany table, her notes organized into crisp sections, her pen hovering just above a page lined with observations. The conversation around her had descended into a predictable spiral of corporate buzzwords: agile implementation, synergy, performance optics. But not a single word had addressed the discrepancies she had flagged. Jeremy Langston spoke with the casual bravado of someone used to being the loudest voice in the room. Every time Emma opened her mouth to clarify a detail, he would wave her off with a half smile or redirect the conversation to one of his associates. Beside him, Derek Chen, a senior analyst with a reputation for speed rather than precision, clicked through a slideshow of charts. At one point, he projected a revenue projection graph that had 3 conflicting baselines. Emma leaned forward. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "The baseline projection at Q2 seems to contradict both the YTD trend line and the cost overlay. May I ask what algorithm was used to normalize this?" Derek blinked. Jeremy glanced at him, amused. "I believe we used a linear extrapolation with fixed variance," Derek replied, vaguely. Emma didn't smile. Then the standard deviation would have surfaced in the margins. It didn't. The room grew still. Emma flipped her notebook to a marked page and placed a printout on the table. It was a clean breakdown of revenue by quarter, cross-referenced against expense reports. "Page 6, bottom half," she said. "The error margin exceeds acceptable thresholds, especially for a division dealing with over $200 million in state-managed infrastructure funds." Jeremy's smirk faltered. One of the women at the far end, her badge reading Olivia Shaw, frowned, leaning in for a closer look. "Where did you pull this data?" Olivia asked. "Your public filings combined with supplier invoices from the state archive," Emma answered. "I cross-referenced them manually." There was a pause. Jeremy cleared his throat. "We appreciate the diligence," he said, the word landing with unintended sharpness. "But this meeting isn't an audit. We're here to prepare optics for next quarter's investor board." Emma nodded. "And optics that contradict financial reality won't hold under pressure, especially if the press requests access." Jeremy stiffened. The room went quiet. For the first time, the hierarchy had shifted. Olivia flipped another page in Emma's printout. "Is this what you meant by invisible risk vectors in your pre-report?" Emma gave a quiet nod. "Exactly. They appear minor until you connect the third-party subcontractors and missed VAT reimbursements." The hum of a nearby air vent filled the silence. Across the room, one of the younger analysts lowered his gaze to his laptop, typing quickly, perhaps back-checking her claims. Jeremy straightened in his chair, measured now. "You said earlier that your background is in local government consulting, and you come from where again?" "Southridge Township," she replied simply. The room shifted. Ever so slightly. Southridge was working class, agricultural, not the typical origin of someone consulting for a multi-million-dollar firm in downtown Chicago. "Impressive," Olivia muttered under her breath. Not mockingly, but with a tone bordering on reluctant. "Respect?" Jeremy glanced again at the printout. "We'll take your findings under advisement." Emma closed her folder with quiet confidence. She knew that line. It was corporate speak for, "We weren't ready to hear this, but now we have no choice." As the meeting adjourned, Jeremy exited without another word. But Olivia lingered. She stepped beside Emma, nodding toward the page. "On subcontractor inconsistencies." "You're right," she said in a low voice. "That account has been off for months. No one's wanted to chase it." Emma offered a brief smile. "Numbers don't lie. They just wait patiently to be noticed." Outside the window, the city glowed under a gray winter sky. Emma watched the traffic move below, every vehicle a dot in a larger system, every pattern waiting for someone to listen. Emma returned to her desk on the 21st floor with a stack of papers in her hand and an unreadable look on her face. She passed the cluster of open-plan workstations where sleek suits and buzzword chatter filled the air like static. Nobody looked up. To most of them, she was still just that temporary consultant from a township no one could quite place on a map. Her desk had no framed degrees or motivational quotes, just a plain ceramic mug, a battered laptop, and a small photo of her father standing beside an old ledger, smiling in front of the town's co-op. She sat down, pulled up the spreadsheet she'd quietly built over the past week, and began cross-referencing vendor payments from the last 2 fiscal years. She hadn't expected the subcontractor trail to run so deep. In the span of an hour, she had identified 6 separate vendors, all funneling inflated invoices through a subsidiary that listed the same P.O. box address, a location registered to a derelict storefront in East Chicago. At first glance, they looked like separate companies, but the formatting of the invoices and the metadata in the exported PDFs told a different story. The scheme was subtle: rounded invoice amounts, service descriptions so generic they could apply to anything from data entry to drone surveillance. Each payment was just small enough to avoid triggering standard compliance alerts. But together they totaled nearly $4.3 million. Emma stared at the screen. She could almost hear her father's voice. When something doesn't add up, don't raise your voice. Just raise the math. Behind her she heard footsteps. Quick, deliberate. She didn't turn. Emma, came a voice. Olivia Shaw. Emma glanced over her shoulder. Olivia was holding a tablet, her brow furrowed. We need to talk, she said. They found an empty conference room. Frosted glass, sterile chairs, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Olivia pulled the door closed behind her. You weren't bluffing, she said, placing the tablet on the table. I checked every figure, the subcontractors, the reimbursements, the tax irregularities. She paused, then added, How long have you known? Emma didn't blink. I started seeing the patterns a few days after the intake meeting, but I needed proof. Olivia nodded slowly, visibly impressed. You realize this goes way beyond accounting errors. This could be criminal misappropriation of funds, possibly with state implications. I do, Emma replied, her voice calm. And you've said nothing? Until now? Emma's gaze was steady. Because saying something too early would have given them time to bury it. I needed the trail to be undeniable. There was silence between them. Olivia sank into a chair across from her, folding her arms. Jeremy's been in charge of those accounts for nearly 5 years. If this blows, he'll try to claim ignorance, maybe pin it on someone else. Emma gave a soft breath. I'm not interested in headlines. I just want the truth to surface. Outside the glass, the office buzzed on. Meetings, emails, irrelevant distractions. But in that small room, something had shifted. Olivia was no longer assessing Emma. Through the lens of her resume, she was listening. Finally, Olivia spoke again. Would you be willing to walk me through your findings, line by line? Emma nodded. Of course, but you should know. If this goes where I think it will, you'll have to choose whether to protect your position or stand with the numbers. Olivia's expression changed. For the first time, there was a flash of conscience behind her polished exterior. I've played the politics long enough, she said. I'd rather be on the side that doesn't need a PR team to sleep at night. Emma reached into her folder and pulled out a fresh printout. Then let's begin. 3 days later, Emma found herself standing outside conference room 7B, the same room where she had been politely sidelined during her first week. Inside, the full senior strategy team was seated, arranged in a half circle like a modern tribunal. The head of operations, the CFO, and Jeremy Thornton himself sat at the far end. Olivia stood by the monitor, queuing up the file Emma had prepared but refused to present herself. "Let's move quickly," Jeremy said, adjusting his watch. "We've got budget reviews after this." Emma entered the room with quiet composure, holding only a single folder. Somewhere near the middle of the room, one of the execs whispered under their breath, "Here comes the town accountant." A few smirks followed. Emma heard every word but said nothing. She placed the folder on the table, opened her laptop, and plugged into the projector. The first slide appeared on screen: pattern recognition, vendor duplication, and shell trails. At first Jeremy leaned back, arms crossed, the familiar arrogance of a man certain of his immunity. "Let's skip to the conclusions," he said, smirking. Olivia shook her head. "No, she's walking us through it, all of it." Emma didn't look up. She clicked to the next slide. Line by line, she detailed how over a dozen invoices, submitted under different company names, shared formatting, phrasing, and payment routes. The room's energy shifted. The smirks faded. Someone began taking notes. She moved to the next slide, this time a visual, a flowchart of payment paths branching from the firm's core operating account to a complex web of intermediary entities. Then, back to a single shell corporation tied to an address in East Chicago. That was when the silence turned heavy. Jeremy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Where did you get access to those transaction paths?" Emma's voice was even. "From your own quarterly reports. You submitted them for internal review." His jaw tightened. Another exec cleared their throat. "This can't be real. That routing. It's intentional laundering." Emma turned to the final slide, a time-stamped index showing when each payment had been made, always during peak audit windows when scrutiny would be lowest. At the bottom of the screen were 4 red highlighted entries, all signed off by Jeremy. "Thornton," the CFO blinked. "Are these authentic?" "I cross-checked them with server logs. You can verify them independently." Jeremy stood suddenly. "This is ridiculous. She's not even on our core finance team. This is speculative, borderline defamation." Emma didn't flinch. She simply reached into her folder and pulled out a signed affidavit. Notarized. "Yesterday, Olivia and I submitted this to the Internal Audit Division this morning. You'll be receiving formal notification by noon." The room remained frozen. For a moment it seemed Jeremy might lunge for some counterattack. But there was nothing left to grasp. Emma continued calmly, "I'm not here to embarrass anyone, but I won't allow a culture of silence to protect fraud." The head of operations, who had not spoken once, finally leaned forward. "How long have you been tracking this?" "Since the second week I arrived." "And you kept quiet?" "I wanted the math to speak louder than my title." A quiet hum of acknowledgement passed around the room. Jeremy, meanwhile, stood ashen-faced. His silence now was not strategic. It was survival. Emma gathered her folder, nodded to Olivia, and unplugged her laptop. Before she exited the room, she turned just enough to say, "I'll leave the rest in the hands of those who understand what integrity looks like when no one's watching." The door clicked shut behind her. The news spread faster than Emma had anticipated. By the time she returned to her desk, a strange hush had fallen over the floor. No more smirking glances, no more hushed mocking behind coffee mugs. Instead, people were watching her, really watching her, as if trying to reframe everything they thought they knew. Jeremy's office door remained closed. A glass of untouched water sat on his conference table. No one dared knock. In the break room, a few employees whispered her name like it was newly sacred. "She really did it," one murmured. "Took him down with a spreadsheet," another replied, half in awe. Emma didn't revel in the attention. She didn't need to. Her dignity came not from the collapse of another, but from standing still while others tried to push her down. Later that afternoon, HR sent an internal memo. Effective immediately, Jeremy Thornton is on indefinite leave. Pending investigation. The company's legal team followed up with a formal acknowledgement. Emma was CC'd, not blind copied. That subtle difference was loud, but what caught her off guard wasn't the silence or the emails. It was what happened next. As she stepped into the elevator on her way to the compliance office, a young associate she barely knew, Mei Lin from IT, hesitated before following her in. "I just wanted to say," Mei began softly, avoiding eye contact, "what you did today. It meant something. A lot of us noticed." Emma nodded, appreciative. "Thank you. I used to think people like us, quiet, not flashy, didn't stand a chance here unless we played their game." Emma smiled gently. "Turns out the rules can change if someone's willing to call out the cheat." The elevator dinged. That evening, Olivia knocked on Emma's office door. She looked exhausted, but energized. "You know what they're calling." "You in the lounge?" Olivia said with a smirk. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Dare I ask?" "The accountant avenger." Emma chuckled. "Please tell me there's no cape involved." But behind the humor, both women understood. Something had shifted. The firm's senior board, previously unreachable figures known more by reputation than presence, had requested a one-on-one with Emma. They weren't just curious, they were concerned. She had exposed a liability, yes, but more than that, she had demonstrated a kind of integrity that couldn't be faked. In a world fueled by performance metrics and surface-level charisma, Emma had reminded them of something rare: principle. When she walked into the boardroom 2 days later, she wore the same neutral suit, no makeup, no theatrics, just herself. That, she knew now, was enough. The chairman stood. "Ms. Caldwell, you forced this institution to look inward. And frankly, we needed it." They offered her a new role: head of internal ethics and oversight, direct reporting line to the board, full access, full authority. She didn't accept right away. Instead, she looked around the polished room, the framed mission statements on the wall, the nervous eyes awaiting her answer. Then she spoke, calmly, clearly. "I'll take the position. On one condition," the room stilled, "that this department won't just be a figurehead. I don't want a title. I want teeth. I want resources. I want protections for whistleblowers. And I want every person here to understand that silence is not professionalism. It's complicity." A pause, then the chairman nodded. "Granted." As she left the boardroom, Emma didn't smile. Not because she wasn't proud, but because she understood. The real work was only beginning. If you've made it this far, thank you. That means something in this fast, noisy world. If this story speaks to you, even a little, please take a moment to like it, share it, and leave a comment below. We'd truly love to hear your voice. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that restore dignity, reveal truth, and resonate long after the screen fades. Now, take a breath, and let's return to the story. What happens next may stay with you for a very long time. Emma Caldwell didn't ask for a bigger office. Instead, she requested a plain corner room on the same floor as the legal and compliance teams. No glass walls, no executive view, just enough space for a desk, a whiteboard, and a filing cabinet. "I'm not here to redecorate," she told the facilities manager when he asked about upgrades. "I'm here to recalibrate." Her first official day as head of internal ethics and oversight began not with a ribbon cutting or press release, but with A series of quiet visits. She knocked on doors others avoided. Finance, human resources, risk management, IT security. Each meeting followed the same pattern. Polite surprise, cautious curiosity, then a slow dawning realization that Emma was not here to police people. She was here to empower them to do their jobs better. She asked how. Questions no one had dared ask before. What happens when someone reports misconduct anonymously? What safeguards are in place to protect low-level employees from retaliation? When was the last time we audited internal promotions for bias? Some answers came quickly. Others, especially from departments used to shielding senior executives, were met with hesitation. Emma wasn't confrontational. She was methodical, and that made her harder to dismiss. She introduced monthly integrity reviews, not just for staff, but for leadership. She demanded transparency and policy exceptions. She implemented an anonymous reporting system that didn't root through HR but through her team. She called it Project Echo. Because when someone speaks up, she explained in a staff-wide email, their voice should not disappear. It should echo until it is heard. At first, resistance came in whispers. She's going to ruin morale. Watch out. Caldwell's office is the new confessional. She's turning this place into a church. But the whispers soon quieted, because the first time an intern reported a toxic manager and wasn't punished, word spread. The first time a hiring committee reversed a biased decision, people noticed. And the first time an executive tried to interfere with an ethics inquiry and was formally reprimanded, everything changed. Jeremy Thornton never returned. His name faded from the building like a shadow cleared by dawn. Meanwhile, Emma's presence grew, not in volume but in substance. She began holding open sessions called integrity circles, where employees from all levels could speak freely. No recordings, no names, just stories. Some wept, some raged. All were heard, and in the back row of those sessions, Emma always sat silently, listening, taking notes. Not just for policy changes, but for something deeper, cultural reform. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fast. But week by week, the firm began to bend, not break, toward something better. Then came the email from the CEO himself. Subject line, private meeting request. Strategic realignment discussion. Emma read it 3 times. When she walked into the executive boardroom again, the atmosphere was different. Not hostile. Not even skeptical. Respectful. We've been watching what you're building, the CEO said simply. We think it's time to scale it across the entire firm. Nationally. Emma paused. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, but also the hesitation, the corporate instinct to retain power while appearing progressive. She smiled faintly. Only if it's real, he nodded. That's why we want you to lead it. As she left the room, emails and policy proposals already forming in her mind, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The same face, the same quiet expression. But behind the stillness, a storm of clarity. The first memo arrived unsigned, folded neatly on her desk one morning, printed on company letterhead but with no sender. Watch your step. You're not as protected as you think. Emma Caldwell didn't flinch. She read the words twice, then calmly slid the paper into a folder labeled Documentation, Intimidation Attempts. She didn't alert security. Not yet. She knew exactly what this was. A warning dressed in cowardice. It didn't surprise her. Over the past 3 weeks, her reforms had begun touching uncomfortable nerves, particularly among the vice president tier. These were not loud opponents like Jeremy Thornton. They were quiet anchors, men and women who thrived on status quo, on gray zones where accountability was optional and self-interest rewarded. Emma's integrity circles, now replicated in 6 departments, had started to uncover patterns, not just isolated misconduct, but cultures of silence. One office showed hiring bias stretching back a decade. Another revealed expense report fraud buried beneath strategic consulting fees. Each revelation chipped away at an unspoken pact among the old guard. Protect the nameplate, protect the perks. And now they were pushing back. At first it was subtle. Calendar invites mysteriously disappearing. Department heads forgetting to include her in meetings. Budget approvals delayed without explanation. Then came the whispers. She's trying to turn us into a surveillance state. She's power tripping. Under the guise of reform. And most tellingly, she's not one of us. Emma heard it all. She kept notes. Not out of paranoia, but precision. Her team began receiving odd emails, requests to clarify their loyalties. One junior investigator found herself uninvited from a mentorship program after she refused to alter a report. It was retaliation, but done with gloves on. Emma didn't escalate to the board yet. She escalated to the people. She called an emergency. Open session, not mandatory, not recorded. Just an invitation. Over 70 employees showed up. They sat in silence for a minute before Emma spoke. I was warned not to push too hard, she said. But I need to ask you all. Do we want real change or just the illusion of it? A young analyst raised her hand. They're scared of what happens if people like us get to define the culture. A ripple of murmurs followed. They're right to be scared, said a voice from the back. An older man Emma recognized from logistics. Because it's already changing. Emma smiled. Not because the battle was won, but because she wasn't alone. After the session, she sent a carefully worded message to senior leadership. Change will always feel threatening to those who benefited from imbalance, but imbalance is no longer our brand. Then she did something unexpected. She invited every single VP to a private one-on-one meeting. No agenda. Just conversation. Some declined. Some sent subordinates. But 9 showed up. And one of them, a woman who had once overseen compliance but now managed a division Emma had flagged for internal bias, looked her in the eye and said, I don't like your methods, but I can't argue with the results. What do you want from us? Emma leaned forward, hands folded. Not submission, not silence, just collaboration. It wasn't a surrender, but it was a crack in the wall. That night, as she walked past the glass corridors reflecting her faint silhouette, Emma felt something stirring in the building itself. A shift. They were still watching her, still whispering, but they were also listening. It happened on a Tuesday morning, quarterly town hall day. Employees had filed into the main auditorium of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, sipping coffee and scanning the agenda. The CEO, the CFO, the VP of Strategy, all present on stage. Emma sat quietly in the 3rd row. She wasn't scheduled to speak. But she sensed something was coming. The whispers had grown louder over the weekend, a rumor that she'd overstepped, that her integrity circles had gone too far. That she'd accused the wrong person. As the VP of Strategy, Mark Leland, stepped up to the podium, she recognized the glint in his eye. This quarter, he began, has been one of transitions, of learning. He clicked the remote. A slide. Appeared behind him, employee trust metrics. And yet, he said slowly, we've seen reports, unverified, possibly exaggerated, that paint a picture of dysfunction. These reports have names attached. Emma's name was there, bold, top of the list. Gasps rippled through the audience. not because they believed it, but because someone had dared to make it public. Now, Mark continued, voice smooth, no one is above scrutiny, so in the interest of transparency, we will be reviewing the actions of all departments, including those recently formed. He didn't say, Integrity Office. He didn't have to. Emma stood up. Silence fell. She walked calmly toward the mic set up for Q&A. Some in the crowd leaned forward. Others shrank back. Thank you, Mark, she said, voice steady. Transparency is exactly what we need. So let's be transparent. Mark froze, hand hovering over the remote. Emma turned to the audience. Yes, my office has flagged misconduct. Yes, some of it involved senior staff, and yes, some people are uncomfortable with that. She paused. But the only question we should ask today is, what do we stand for, appearances or accountability? A murmur spread. The COO glanced toward the CEO, who remained still. Emma reached into her folder. She pulled out a printed report, fully redacted except for 2 pages. I won't name names, she said, but I will name the patterns. Falsified reimbursements, unreported conflicts of interest, and interview panels where only one gender ever advances. She laid the papers down on the podium. This isn't a witch hunt. It's a mirror. Silence. Then, a hand went up in the back. It was Ava Lynn from the events team, a mid-level staffer. I worked under one of those VPs, she said clearly. I saw those patterns. I was told to stay quiet. A man from HR stood next. So was I. Then another. And another. Mark looked pale. The CEO leaned forward, whispering something to his aide. Emma stepped back. She didn't need to shout. The room had already shifted. Later that afternoon, she was called into the executive boardroom. Every major decision-maker was there. No smiles. No small talk. The CEO gestured to a seat. Emma, he began, you've created something disruptive. He said it like a warning. She met his gaze. Disruption is how change begins. There was a long silence. Then he leaned back. Fine. You'll lead the new ethics council, full access, but you report directly to me now. No detours. No circles without oversight. Emma nodded. She didn't smile, she'd won. But she knew. Victory here always came with a price. That evening, as she walked past the glass office doors, her reflection stared back, tired, but unbroken. She hadn't just survived the strike. She had turned it into fuel. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. Emma stood between 2 aides who didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. Just before the doors opened, one of them cleared his throat. He's waiting. Alone. The governor, yes, that's what they called him internally. Nathan Pierce, CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, had requested a private meeting. She stepped into the room. The office was cavernous. One wall of glass revealed the skyline of downtown Chicago, where ambition shimmered in every light. Nathan sat behind a minimalist desk, hands folded. No smile. I hear you've been busy, he said flatly. Emma didn't sit. I've been doing what you hired me to do. Nathan tilted his head. That depends on how you interpret your mandate. Emma met his gaze. I interpret it as truth, without spin, without PR. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without looking away, he opened a drawer and slid a folder across the desk. Read it. Inside was a proposal. A new department. The Corporate Integrity Division. Fully funded. Direct access to senior staff. Unlimited discretion, on paper at least. And at the bottom of the document, Director, Emma Caldwell. She looked up. You want me to institutionalize what we started, she said. I want you to make it real, Nathan replied. What you did, downstairs, turning that moment into momentum. That's what this place needs. She took a slow breath. But let's be honest, he added. This only works if we keep it manageable. Define manageable, she said. Nathan leaned back. No grandstanding, no media. You work inside the walls, not outside, no heroes, just structure. Emma's fingers tightened slightly on the folder. Structure is what got us here, she said. Structure, he replied, is also how we fix it, but only if the right people are in charge. He stood, walked to the window, and continued without turning back. Emma, I know you're principled, but this company doesn't run on principles alone. It runs on systems. If you stay outside, you'll always be fighting shadows. If you step in, you get to build something permanent. The offer was generous, real power, real change, but it came with unspoken rules. Control the tone. Don't push too fast. Don't name names without approval. She closed the folder. What happens if I say no? Nathan turned around. You'll still have a desk, still have a voice, but someone else will shape the council, and they won't be you. That night she walked home along the river walk, folder still in hand. The air was cold. Her phone buzzed. Messages from colleagues, former skeptics now eager to collaborate. Ava from events had already started a Slack channel called Voices. Change. She paused at the railing, watching reflections dance across the water. For years, she'd believed in silent endurance. That truth would rise if you simply held the line long enough. But today had taught her something else. Truth needed allies, and sometimes allies needed access. But access came with a price. Was she ready to walk that line? To lead, but from within a system that had once tried to silence her? She thought of her father, an elementary school teacher who once told her, "The goal isn't to destroy the institution, it's to make it worthy of the people it serves." She looked up at the skyline, her reflection caught in the glass of an empty office building. This wasn't just her battle anymore. It was a chance to rewrite the rules for everyone who'd ever been underestimated, silenced, or told to stay in their place. She turned and walked home with the folder pressed against her chest. Tomorrow, she would decide. The morning air felt different, not colder, not warmer, just clearer. Emma stood in the lobby of Pinnacle headquarters, holding the signed folder in her hand. The receptionist, once dismissive, now greeted her with a professional nod. No fanfare, no whispers, just acknowledgement. As she stepped into the executive elevator, her reflection in the polished doors caught her attention. She looked like the same woman from a month ago. Simple black coat, sensible shoes, no designer badge or corporate affectation. But everything had changed. This time, she wasn't walking into a battle. She was walking into her role as Director of Integrity. When the elevator doors opened, a team was already waiting. Ava, Ravi from legal, two young analysts who had once been too afraid to speak at meetings. They stood when she entered the room, not out of obligation, but respect. "Shall we begin?" Emma said gently. They did. Within the hour, a small internal newsletter was drafted. No press release, no spotlight. Just a message sent quietly to the company intranet. Effective immediately, a new division will review and enhance ethical standards. Across departments, transparency, fairness, and accountability are no longer optional. They are the foundation of our future. That week, Emma visited every department. She didn't issue warnings or wave titles. She listened, took notes, invited stories. And the stories came. Quietly, tentatively at first, but they came. A marketing assistant who'd been denied promotion for 3 years despite glowing reviews. A junior manager who'd been forced to approve numbers she knew were inflated. A custodian who'd overheard confidential conversations no one thought he could understand. Emma listened to them all. She created a system where complaints weren't just filed, they were resolved. She started weekly open hours. Anyone could walk. No appointment, no fear. By the second month, productivity in the analytics department had risen by 12%. More importantly, hallway conversations had changed. People no longer whispered, they spoke. Some still rolled their eyes behind closed doors. Some still said, "She got lucky. This won't last." But Emma didn't need it to last forever. She just needed it to start. One evening, as she left the building, Travis, her former boss, was waiting by the entrance. The same man who had once mocked her voice, her tone, her worth. "Director Caldwell," he said, the title awkward in his mouth. "Mr. Travis," she replied evenly. He hesitated. "I read your memo about merit-based advancement. It's solid." Emma didn't reply. He looked away, then back again. "You're changing this place." Emma met his gaze, not with smugness, not with vengeance, just clarity. "I'm not changing it," she said. "I'm helping it remember what it was supposed to be." He gave a tight nod and walked away. Emma stood still for a moment, watching the sun disappear behind the skyline. She knew there would be setbacks, sabotage, resistance. But she also knew the tide had turned. Not because of a title, not because of a speech, but because a simple woman refused to stay silent. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. Leave us a comment below. Where are you watching from? Have you ever been underestimated and quietly proved them wrong? Let's talk about resilience, quiet courage, and how one act of integrity can shift an entire system. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching and walking with us through Emma Caldwell's quiet revolution.